only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to Lee Anderson's Real World, and tonight we're in the Parsons Pig in Crawley. I think that's in Essex, it's down south anyway, somewhere. Tonight on the show we've got Belinda de Lucy, she's a former MEP. Also we've got Dennis McShane, former Labour MP. We've got My Mum, Your Dad reality TV contestant, that's Natalie Russell. Also got former model and reality TV star, that's Chloe Goodman. But first, let's go to the news.
Good evening. Your top stories from the GB Newsroom. The Prime Minister says Islamist extremism aims to drain us of our confidence in ourselves as a people. Addressing the nation outside Downing Street this evening, he vowed to back police taking action against problem protests and said universities must also do more to crack down on extremism on campuses. Rishi Sunak says Islamist extremists are spreading a poison. In a statement, the Labour leader has backed the Prime Minister's message calling for unity in the country. The Prime Minister signalled the government will unveil what he called a robust framework for dealing with the growing problem of extremism.
They want us to doubt ourselves, to doubt each other, to doubt our country's history and achievements. They want us to accept a moral equivalence between Britain and some of the most despicable regimes in the world. Let us prove these extremists wrong and show them that even when we disagree, we will never be disunited from our common values of decency and respect.
Meanwhile, whilst addressing the nation, Rishi Sunak said the Rochdale by-election result was beyond alarming. That's after it was won by George Galloway. The UK's leading Jewish organisation has described the Workers' Party leader as a conspiracy theorist who brings division and hate to every place he's ever stood for Parliament. During his career, Galloway has also presented programmes for both the Russian and Iranian state broadcasters. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says he'll stoke fear and division.
Galloway only won because Labour didn't stand a candidate. I regret that we had to withdraw our candidate and apologise to voters in Rochdale. But I took that decision. It was the right decision. And when I say I've changed the Labour Party, I mean it. Obviously, we will put a first-class candidate, a unifier, before the voters in Rochdale at the general election.
Some breaking news to bring you this hour. An investigation has been launched after 3 people have been injured in South London following reports of a shooting. Around 5 o'clock this afternoon, police said they were chasing a moped that failed to stop when a shotgun was fired from it at Clapham Common. Police say 2 people sustained pellet injuries. A third was injured by the moped itself. The suspects fled the scene. Emergency crews say they treated 3 people at the scene and took 2 to hospital. None of the injuries are thought to be life-threatening. We'll bring you more on this breaking story as we get it. And the cost of the government's Rwanda scheme could soar to £500 million plus hundreds of thousands more for each migrant sent there. An investigation by the public spending watchdog found the millions in additional spending includes £11,000 for each migrant's plane ticket. There will also be an extra £20,000 paid to Rwanda for every asylum seeker who's relocated, with more than £150,000 per person to cover ongoing costs. For the latest stories, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen, or you can go to gbnews.com/alerts.
So now on the show, we've got the brilliant Dennis McShane, former Labour MP. Thanks for coming, Dennis. And the very lovely Belinda de Lucy, former MEP. We're in the Parsons Pig this week in Crawley, stranger venue, but look at the food they put on. It's absolutely brilliant. It's absolutely Spanish. So big thanks to the staff here. I've had better weeks. And we ain't going to talk about it. We'll talk about something completely different. Or shall we? Let's talk about British values. Let's talk about a British way of life. And let's talk about how things have changed over the years. And let's also talk about the right to free speech in this country. Dennis, you're a little bit older than me. A lot older than Belinda. That's not an ageist comment, by the way. How have things changed over the years? Have they changed for the better or for the worse?
Every freedom had to be fought for. Every freedom required a mob, to coin a fashionable phrase, to shake down the railings of Hyde Park to get the vote. Every freedom had to have the mob in Cable Street to stop the Daily Mail attacking Jews and printing the address in the King's Road, London, of the British Union of Fascists and urging people to join it. Now, a lot of I was involved in some strikes, not like any minor strike, I'd hasten to add, but that also required pressure, because the guys in charge, the blob, the money men, have never given anything to the working people of Britain without real pressure.
Like the Labour Party.
The Labour Party, let's be quite serious. You want me to list all the reforms that were brought in? I want you to talk, Dennis, about are things better today than they were in the 50s, 60s, 70s? I certainly think so. I wrote a pamphlet in 1978 called Black and White Race Reporting in Britain, and I did a research then, 1978, not a single black journalist or Asian journalist was employed by the BBC or ITN or on newspapers. Now, quite rightly, we were like with the Prime Minister, we've got stars of Britain on TV. At the time, I was denounced in the Times by a major columnist called Bernard Levin, writing noddy language. This isn't necessary. So, yes, I think things are...
Belinda, I know you're dying to come in here, aren't you?
Well,
You've got children.
Yeah, I've got 4 teenagers.
First thought in a debate like this, what sort of country your daughter's been brought up in?
Well, I feel very much it's a responsibility for the older generation to pass the baton down to the younger generations of the freedoms that were fought for, men and women sacrificed their lives for. And I do think they're under threat because we've gone too far the other way. You know, I wouldn't so much like to go back to the 50s and 60s, but the 90s for me were the peak year. It wasn't perfect, but race relations were getting much better. Women's rights were probably the best they've been. And then all of a sudden came this monstrosity of woke identity politics that has actually harmed race relations. We now have anti-white racism being normalised on TV. We now have theatres saying they're disinviting white people because they want black-only audience to save them from the white gaze. This is all now acceptable racist speech, but because it's against white people, you know, the Lib left sanction it. And I think that's a terrible road to go down with BLM, critical race theory, infiltrating so much of our public sector.
And better under a Labour government?
Much worse under a Labour government, especially as they bring in sort of through the back door blasphemy laws. You know, we've spent centuries in this country having the right to free speech, being able to criticise ideas and religions, and that's going to be taken away from us soon if we let Labour and Lib Dems have their redefinition of, say, for example, Islamophobia. Totally against anti-Muslim bigotry, of course, but where the definition is expanded to, you know, any kind of prejudice against a religion, why can't people be prejudiced against some religions? With
I've no problems with that, Lee.
Especially as a woman, when I see how it's interpreted.
Let me just say, I'd be a little more relaxed in this excellent conversation if somebody here was not white, because you're speaking for black people, I'm speaking for black race, Lee is. Let them speak for themselves, but they're always silenced. Now, to go back to the religion point, I couldn't agree more. One of the big tensions was when I was negotiating the European so-called constitutional treaty. I'm not getting into Europe, don't worry, Lee. But the Vatican was lobbying very heavily to put a line in about banning Catholic attacks on Catholic phobia attacks, if you like. And I said, with Jack Straw's support, with the help of the French, you must be joking. Religion has to stand on its own 2 feet. It's oppressed. Different religions have oppressed different people over centuries, if not millennia. And the religion must be criticised, open to criticism, which is why, stand by for shock, all Labour friends, shut your ears. I actually agree with Kemi Badenoch. Islamophobia is the wrong phrase. Muslim phobia, of which too many people on the right are actually stoking up that at the moment, is what we should talk about. Defend the person, not his beliefs.
So, Dennis, we have to be very careful with our language, with our choice of words, and when religion's brought into the argument, it can get little bit tricky sometimes, and people lay traps and try and trip you up. But it's important to remember that for certain religions, maybe Christianity or Islam, when you criticise a person, you're not by definition criticising their religion. You're criticising the person, surely.
It just depends in the terms of reference. If I say Islamists or Muslims have got control of somebody or something in England, some people will agree, some people won't. If I say Jews have got control of anything in England, the heavens fall in on me, because that was quite common language in the 1930s, 40s. Read any John Buchan thriller novel, and the references to Jews are really disgusting. I think they're still on sale. Yeah. So that's just my own personal distinction. Don't play the man, play the ball. If you don't like aspects of a religion, that's been a debate for 3,000 or 4,000 years.
Well, Linda, don't play the man, play the ball. Has he got a point?
I'm just thinking, I think it's slightly, you make a good point, but it is different because there's actual evidence and there's many examples of threatening and intimidating behaviour in this country that is shaping policy and curtailing free speech. You have the Batley teacher still in hiding 3 years now. No politician in the Tory party or the Labour Party has the spine to speak publicly about that. That's a horrendous breach of what's important to the fabric of our society and free speech. You've got the autistic boy that was hauled before Islamist clerics because he scuffed a Quran. The humiliation that boy went through. These things are visually so upsetting to many numbers of Brits because they're thinking, gosh, what's happened to our country? How is it allowed to become intimidated by this threatening radical Islamist movement that has been given sanctuary by the hard left? The two almost work together now to shape and put pressure and frighten people. I've lived in areas before. I've been terrified of the actions of Islamist men towards me. Very different from the Muslim community, by the way, because Islamism is a punishing ideology, whereas Muslim community I think works very well in this country. The Islamists, though, have got a lot of power to make people frightened about what they say and what they do, and that is our politicians and authorities being too weak to stand up to them. Ever since Salman Rushdie got a fatwa, we've been allowing a lot of violent threats and protests and anti-Britishness and to come onto our streets.
Okay, over to you, Dennis.
When I wrote a book called Globalising Hatred and the New Anti-Semitism, I was sanctioned partly by the press because I said 20 years ago in a speech that Islamism is a real threat, the ideology of Islamism. Now, the Labour Party doesn't give sanctuary to these people. That's ridiculous. They actually cause immense turmoil and trouble. I mean, I'm in the Labour Party. I know that. In the 2005 election...
So is Jeremy Corbyn.
He's not, thank God.
No, yeah.
He's up.
But Keir Starmer, the leader, supported Jeremy when Jeremy said he was friends with Hamas. There are elements of the Labour Party people have a right to be concerned about.
Every politician, and I don't want to cite the most distinguished politicians we've got on our sofa today, is crucified for something he said that was wrong 10 or whatever number of years ago. I'm not going to go through Nigel Farage, and I like Nigel, but my God, he said some wacko things. Now, in 2005 election, I had the Islamist, it's called the Muslim Public Affairs Committee, organising a protest against me outside a mosque where I was speaking, because mosques are also open to any outsiders. It's not just a religious ceremony. Shouting out to everybody, vote BNP, get rid of McShane, vote BNP. Now, you'll know, Lee, BNP was an openly fascist, anti-Semitic, racist party. So there we are. George Galloway allied with the BNP at some stage in one of his campaigns. He's allied with everybody. That's the problem. You've got too much hate generally in this country.
That's a long time ago. What we're now facing is a different threat which people don't feel they are free to address publicly as much as they'd have been free to have a go at the BNP rallies. But you politicians are reaping what you sow. The amount of championing of unconditional immigration and diversity at all costs, and everything needs to be knelt at the altar of multiculturalism. This is what happens when you don't put integration policies in.
This 12 minutes has flown by.
Do something.
Belinda's on a high horse. I think that's 1-0 to Belinda. But I've got to cut you short, Dennis.
You are, Lee, so you do something about it.
Look, do not go away, because coming up after the break we have Back in the Day with Natalie Russell.
From 10 a.m. every Saturday, we want to make you think and we want to make you laugh.
So we will give you all the top stories.
Now we start with a story that has shocked the nation this week.
But we're also going to make it light and fun and bring some entertainment in to make your Saturday morning nice and restful.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
Sadiq Khan, 6.3 million on a virtue signal, load of lines. Why is he spending the people's money in this way? And why is nobody saying anything? I want to hear from Suzanne Hall, the potential Conservative candidate, or Howard Cox, the potential Reform candidate who could potentially take this off Sadiq Khan. Why are they not speaking? This is ridiculous.
Well, it was sprung on everybody. Did you know about that?
I didn't know about it.
Nobody knows. So they're spending this money. They're spending £6.3 million, and no one knew about it. Where's the press? Where are the public consultations? No one knew. I think it's a good idea to rename the train lines, because all these train lines are there are like 4 of them, 6 of them, whatever, and they're all going all these different directions. And you tell someone to come, and you don't even know the name.
Yeah, but 6.3 million. Listen, if you want to give me 6.3 million to come up with some virtue signalling lines, I'd like to know which advertising agency he employed to do this, how long it took him, and why he's even done it in the first place. Why has he done this?
He has done this with the virtue signalling because he's part of Team World. He's Rishi Sunak. It's this whole concept is every inclusiveness. There is no country. Nobody's English. Our own history is bad. Not my history, but whatever. The English history is bad. And it's a denial of history. It's Orwellian or something. Yeah. Not that I know about.
I think it's an absolute absurdity that Sadiq Khan should be doing that. He's got a knife crime epidemic, people stealing watches off people walking down the street.
Yes.
You've got the burglary at an all-time high. London, a lot of people are put off by it. And this is what he spent £6.3 million on.
This could have been a bit
to speak as to why.
But he doesn't need to speak. People need to speak out and say, well, why didn't we know about this? But the idea, can I say something to you, Nana? The idea is right. It's like, for example, take the Northern Line. You know, there are 6 Northern Lines.
6 Northern Lines.
6 different Northern Lines, maybe more now, because one goes from Mill Hill East to Mill Hill.
This was the overground he was...
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's time for Back in the Day with Natalie Russell. You're a bit of a reality TV star, is that right? My mum, your dad, my mum.
I wouldn't say star either.
Well, you was a contestant on there, weren't you?
Yeah.
And did you actually, it was like a dating programme, wasn't it?
Yeah. It wasn't a contestant as such, because you don't win anything, apart from hopefully a relationship.
And how did that pan out?
Well, I'm still single, so I did meet someone in there, but it only lasted about 3.5 months after I came out. And
it was a keeper then?
Well, evidently not.
So, Natalie, you run a support group for women that's been in abusive relationships, toxic relationships. How does that work?
So I run a free online support group that's a Facebook group, but I also run monthly meetings that are completely free. I do also do self-esteem and relationship recovery coaching and run retreats. But I wanted something that was free for women to access, because when women have come through trauma or have been in unhealthy, toxic relationships or battle with low self-esteem, that having support in that journey...
What's his Facebook group called?
Finding Freedom Women's Collective.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can get a little link on there somewhere at the bottom of this. That'd be helpful. And what sort of successes are you having?
It's not about success because the healing journey is a very long one. Okay. When you've come from trauma or you've been in toxic relationships, that journey back to healing takes a long time. So I offer a space. My colleague Dominique Rowe, we both run it together.
Yep.
We hold that space just so that people have somewhere to go on the healing journey if they don't have the funds or access to be able to pay to get help.
Okay, so life's not always been a bed of roses for you, has it, in the past? You've had a difficult past.
I did.
Yeah, done a bit of time behind bars.
I have.
Yeah, with some problems you had
before.
Exactly, but tell us about that, Natalie. What happened?
It was, I think, a culmination of things. I had challenges in my early formative years that had a huge impact, that you would now look back and say they were adverse childhood experiences. And those added together, I just didn't know how to emotionally process them. So my way of coping was very dysfunctional, which led me down a path being around the wrong people, got into the wrong circles, substances got involved, and that spiraled into criminality to pay for, and it was all about avoidance from trauma. Now I've got older, I understand the connection and the link. So yeah, it was quite a painful journey because it brings more trauma. And then went on a healing journey from about the age of 22.
So at that age, a switch must have clicked in your head and thought, hold on a minute, I need to change what I'm doing.
I think I always had that because from 17, the first time I went into prison, I then came out and went to my first treatment centre. So I always knew that I wasn't supposed to be living like that, but just didn't have the capacity to make changes to be able to cope with my emotions. So I think it was seeds that were fed along the way, support that I was given along the way, but I also wasn't in didn't have the capacity to change at that point. And then I think those seeds at one point where I was in prison for long enough to have long enough of a break took root.
And what do you think when you look back at your life from 17 to 21, being in prison and then changing your life? What do you think? You're quite proud of yourself? You should be.
Yeah, I am massively proud of myself. I think I feel that there's a lot of compassion I feel for that younger self, because I used to blame myself and have a lot of self-hatred because I felt like I was a failure. But I now look back and realise that those experiences and how I navigated that was just a trauma response. So I can look back with a little bit of compassion for myself.
So I guess there were probably maybe some young people today going through what you went through all those years ago. What sort of advice would you give to these young people if you could get to them?
If I could get to them, well, I did youth work for the past 15 years, so I've worked with the most hard-to-reach young people because that was where my heart and passion was. But I think it's very hard. It needs to be a collective effort. It needs to be a societal effort because a child can't change on their own. They need the support to change. Had I had help in the formative early years, that might have made a difference.
I think that's it. I used to work in hostels for young kids. They'd come to us at 16 or 17. We had them for a couple of years. And it was our job to try and turn their lives around a little bit, because these had come out of the care system. They'd either been in foster care or in care homes. Not had the best start in life. And a lot of, especially the lads, were very angry. And they'd end up selling the weed, the 10 bags, to get a bit of money and smoke a bit of dope themselves. And I used to get angry with them. But as I got to know these young people, I then actually got to see why they was doing it. It was an escape. They were part of a little society they created with their friends. And they felt safe for them.
Yeah, well, it's community. None of us like to suffer alone, right? Misery loves company, they say. And we all like to be parts of community. So if you're a mess, you want to feel that there's other people that are a mess, right? So you tend to draw towards, unfortunately, it keeps you locked in a cycle. And it takes a lot of determination, strength, the right support at the right time, and sometimes I think characteristics internally that make that shift.
I think the support is key because, like I said, a lot of these kids come out of, broken homes, in the care system, never really had the proper love of an adult.
No.
They probably are the only contact they've had with adults is adults shouting at them.
This is it, or abuse, or neglect, or abandonment, and all of these things. That it wreaks havoc, and that's what I'm really massive in everything that all the services need to be trauma informed, because if you're not approaching people with a trauma that have trauma with a trauma response to help them to navigate that and learn how to heal that stuff, they're going to repeat cycles.
It just goes on and on. I mean, I've got a theory in my head that when these young kids go into care at 3, 4, 5 year old, we shouldn't put them in care. I think, it would be cheaper for the country, for the taxpayer, and better if we put them into boarding school.
Boarding school?
Yeah, it would be cheaper.
Interesting, yeah.
Because, to pay a foster carer for the care system costs hundreds, if not thousands of pounds a month. I know it does.
Yeah.
And they get to 16, they're booted out, they go and live in a hostel, get in with the wrong crowd, and then criminality starts, then some end up in prison, again costing the taxpayer thousands and thousands. They come out, not much hope in life, not much, no prospects. So I think it would be cheaper to give them a proper education.
It would probably be cheaper. I think it would need to have an approach of where they're getting emotional support.
Yeah, you definitely do that as well, but we're never breaking the cycle.
No.
Are we? And you have to break that cycle somewhere, because we're letting young people down. These young people don't ask to be born.
Absolutely.
And they're born into sometimes, like say, abusive relationships, into bad homes, and what chance have they got?
Well, this is it. The cycle keeps repeating itself, and that's why I try and do my little bit in my own little corner, because I feel like if women can heal, then families heal, right? I've raised 2 boys by myself, and I've had that because of the choices I made, because of my lack of knowledge, my lack of healing. Then I've been left to raise them single-handed, and luckily I've done enough work that they have had a secure enough environment that I've produced hopefully 2 productive members of society. But it takes a lot of work to break that cycle.
You're doing a cracking job.
Thank you. I'm trying. I'm trying. Lovely to meet you too.
Do not go away, because coming up after the break, we've got a roundtable discussion with Dennis McShane and Belinda DeLucy and some locals.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
You have a president in President Biden who's not enforcing the law that was passed by Congress. President Obama, criticize him or not, actually enforced the law and was deporting people that had crossed illegally. Of course, President Trump enforced the law and improved the law to make sure that and worked with Mexico to have the Remain in Mexico policy. Biden has abandoned federal policy. In fact, he's deliberately trying to let in as many immigrants as possible. More for the Democrats, more is better and less is racist.
Just astonishing. And the statement that Greg Abbott put out is really feisty stuff. He said the federal government has broken the contract between the United States and the state of Texas. And the eye numbers, Greg, are simply eye-watering. 6 million illegal immigrants have crossed our southern border in just 3 years, Governor Abbott says. That's more than the population of 33 states in the United States. Astonishing numbers.
And Martin, that's just Texas. If you add Arizona and other border states, it's pushing 10 million. By the end of Biden's term, it'll be 11 million. A study by Yale University a few weeks ago, 3 very liberal professors that did the study estimate there's 22 million illegal aliens. So this is a crisis that was created by Biden. It's what he wants. They want unfettered access to the border. They're letting them in. It's a real hardship on the working people of Texas and other border states. And now it's a real hardship on cities that the federal government, as well as the governors of Texas and other states, are sending some of the migrants to those so-called sanctuary cities.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to the Parsons Pig pub here in Crawley, and we've got Belinda still with us and Dennis, and got some guests in today, some locals. We've got Radabi, Roger and Tony. Going to start with you first, Radabi. We're talking about British values, we're talking about the way things have changed over the years. You came to this country in 1965, I believe. You don't look old enough, by the way. How has things changed over the years?
I think I've noticed a lot more division and hatred in the last few years than I've ever done in the past. I've considered myself equal, and therefore I've been treated equally because I don't see myself as different. We came here, we worked hard,
Where did you come from?
India. I was born in India, but my heritage is Iranian. I'm a Zoroastrian. So there's a lot, if you look into it, there's a lot between Islam and Zoroastrianism. It used to be the religion of the Persian Empire, but there was persecution, and so a lot of us fled to India for refuge. Way before my time. Way before my time. And so, you know, we came here, we worked hard, we've integrated, we never claimed a penny, we paid into the system. First Asians in the road normally, you know, we never lived in an enclave.
Yeah.
And so you know, for me, I've never experienced any hatred or division because I've always felt at one with society. Yeah. Last few years, even I've begun to feel different. Yeah. Does that make sense? It makes sense. And I don't like it.
Okay. Tony, what about you?
Well, there's a number of issues which I sort of feel quite strong about, but picking up on the point there which Radabi meant, I think the key to where we failed with all the immigrants we've had was that there used to be integration, that they used to take part in British life and adopt what were our values. And what seems to have happened now is that they've taken up sort of ghettos where they've adopted the values which they've brought from wherever they've come from, which in a lot of instances are quite alien to British values. And that's where a lot of then the friction develops. And there's a lot of extremists on both sides who then feed on that friction.
And Roger, what can we do to all live in peace, in harmony, and get along together much better? What can we do?
Well, I think this idea of ghettos is not necessarily a bad thing. People like to live among their own, and I think that's happened. You've got Italian quarters, Jewish quarters, you've got all that. I don't think that's necessarily divisive. I think you go to an area, you know, Hounslow is predominantly Asian and so on. I don't see any harm in that. I think the integration is important, but I also think it's important for people to live their own lives. I don't think we should force people to integrate. I think we should force people to speak in a certain way. I'm a plumber. I'm a persecuted minority, believe me. People hate plumbers. One of the most hated groups that we charge people.
It's like 50 quid just for a call out.
It's for all that abuse we get, but we get it not just from me individually. Plumbers, builders, generally. There was a thing on Radio 4 the other day.
Go on, Roger. How much is it for a call out?
Well, it's gonna cost you 100 quid to get me out. There's no way these days. Well, exactly that. It's justifiable. The thing is that I'm not readily identifiable as a plumber. I could go incognito most of the time. But anyway, what I'm saying is that I think this whole idea of we're concentrating on small divisions all the time. What's the difference between Islam and Muslim? And all
Can I just say though, Roger, you want to come and live here?
Yeah.
Learn the flipping language. Well, no, I'm sorry, and accept the fact that the values are, and embrace the values and the culture of the country you choose to go and live in. right? If you want to keep your values and your culture, why the hell did you come here?
Well,
Yes, absolutely.
You should demand anything of your host nation if you like. I don't think you should expect
just accept and embrace.
to change laws to suit them, but I think you can keep your identity. I think it's perfectly all right.
I get my identity. I'm brown. I'm a Zoroastrian. But I'm also integrated and embraced.
Yes, and it's good for people to learn the language, but it's also...
Different opinions there, Belinda, between two. And it's interesting. So you've got, on the one hand, you've got Roger, who I assume was born in this country, disagreeing with Radabi, who was born in a different country. And I would suspect that you tend to agree with
I totally
Radabi.
support, Radabi, because for me, national unity is so important, and duty and service and community. And people really mind in this country when there's no sense of community, you can't even communicate with your neighbours, or you feel like you're suddenly being discriminated against because, as we know, we have had an assault on Britishness from the left. Very much so that we're feeling ashamed of our country and history, where everyone else is allowed to celebrate their country and history. The other thing is, if, God forbid, we are ever at war or attacked, surely a sense of national identity and brotherhood and sisterhood between communities, which can happen with integration. I think the immigration up to 1997 was amazing for this country. It was at a pace that was sustainable. It didn't put a burden on the infrastructure, and it allowed people time to learn the language and integrate and feel part of being British. So together we can feel like a family. And what's happening with this little parallel universe is no one feels like a family anymore.
Belinda, we've got a very confused-looking Dennis. He's shaking his head, he's rolling his eyes, he doesn't agree with you.
Well, I can't, because I was elected MP in 1994, and at every surgery that people like Lee now still does, and I used to do, there would be people coming in that they couldn't get jobs, they couldn't get housing, couldn't get this, couldn't get that, their children weren't being fairly treated. What was the common denominator? The idea that pre-97 it was a paradise of integration.
Here instead of hundreds of thousands, that helped with integration and infrastructure.
I'm terribly sorry. The biggest arrival
You
of
should
immigrants...
be as well. You should be sorry.
Yeah.
Biggest arrival of immigrants in my lifetime came under Margaret Thatcher, because they were needed to do the jobs. A great surge in employment, not unemployment, in population has always happened under the Tories. Rishi Sunak last year let in 962,000 immigrants from Nigeria, Pakistan, India, not telling anybody really. Many of them bringing in dependents. I don't know where they're going to be housed, where the kids are going to get schooling, but that's Tory policy.
I agree. It's Tory policy, Lee.
I just wanted to just do a tiny anecdote, backing up actually what you were saying, Roar, about language. I was in a high-level Swiss seminar in Davos, not the famous Davos Symposium, and the Swiss guy replying on behalf of the Swiss parliamentarians, he said, well, look, there's three things that we do. Number one, Switzerland has got twice the level of immigration, about 27% of the population, than you do in Britain, about 30%. Number two, and we accept it. We don't constantly create tensions about it. Number two, we insist everybody must learn a language. And it's going back to your point. And they put a lot of money into it. We don't spend a penny on now any longer.
If they're all in a country that has three languages, Switzerland is.
God, I mean, that's even more difficult. I mean, a lot
to live in Switzerland.
A lot of our people can't speak English. I mean, and number three, they said, we know who's in the country. You can't get into school, housing, health, social insurance, pensions, driver licence, unless you can show an identity card. And we had identity cards introduced by Labour in 2010. I've got one. I can show it to you if you like. I still think it's out of date, but it's my little memory thing. First thing, Theresa May, who wasn't the brightest bunny... Oh, wait a minute. Is that misogynist?
That's fine.
Is that awful?
Yeah.
Well, I was Belinda on that. She said it was
That is
fine.
not true, by the way. She's very bright.
First thing she did was get rid of knowing who's in the country. And a lot of our troubles I believe, stem from that decision. Every other country in Europe, right, left, liberal, whatever, people are required to have an identity card.
So how's that going to work with the tens of thousands of people with no documents whatsoever coming over here? They're just going to say, my name's Bob Pratt, give me an identity card and get one. And secondly, Dennis, the point is that the British people have voted time and time again for less immigration, more sustainable immigration, and to stop, deport foreign criminals. And each time the Labour and the Conservative Party have utterly denied them at the ballot box their right to dictate their own future. And this is damaging to democracy, that people can no longer vote Liberal.
I don't dissent.
On this one, because I agree slightly with what Belinda's saying, but why do Labour politicians sign letters to stop flights of rapists, murderers, sex pests being deported back to their own country? Why do they do that?
Well, I've never done that. It is I've negotiated that, for example, as a minister. I remember David Blunkett calling me up and saying, Dennis, I've got a plane load of Brazilian illegals on the airport piste of Brize Norton. I want to ship them home to Brazil. We know where they came from, but the Brazilians won't accept the flight. So I phoned up my Brazilian opposite number. I was very quite tough with him. I said, this is unacceptable, Jose, or whatever his name was. These people are not here, and they should be sent back to Brazil. He said, Dennis, I completely agree with you. But what we're not having is this circus of a big humiliation of a giant plane and sort of older Brazilians being dumped back, and they're still our citizens. And you let them in, Dennis. You don't impose visas. You don't have any checks. You let them in. And even today, there are 111 countries that Sunak allows to fly visa-free to London. I don't know about you, Belinda, in Elscourt, but I hear more and more Spanish on the streets of London now, almost in any other foreign language. And the reason for that is anybody from Colombia or any of the Latin American countries can arrive here, walk off the plane. They say they're taking this job, they're not. They say they're here on holiday, and they go straight into the labour market.
The Conservatives have made our beautiful country an all-you-can-eat buffet for the rest of the world to chow down on, with no checks and balances, with absolutely no requirement of any effort to integrate. And it's a huge insult and does a disservice to all the wonderful immigrants we've had over the year that have taken their time, put the effort in. And I think people are getting so frustrated, and they're waking up now and seeing the change in their country, and they don't like it. Not all cultures are the same. Some cultures are terrible for this country, especially towards women and girls, and we need to be far more selective and far more careful of protecting this precious land and making sure we all work together as a family by slowing immigration down and being very selective on who comes here, not based on colour, ever, but based on values, shared values.
I agree with Darby. Final word to you. Would you come again? You could turn the clock back to 1965. Would you come back to the UK?
Brought me, so I didn't actually have much of a choice, but yes, actually, because it's transformed my life, and I love it. I was more British than my husband.
We're finished. Fascinating discussion there. Look, coming up next, we're on the pool with former glamour model. That's Chloe Goodman.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it? Are they...
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Last order of the ball, Chloe Goodman. Welcome to my show. Now, you're an ex-glamour model. You've been on Celebrity Big Brother.
Yeah.
And some other reality TV shows. We've had a few on here, actually.
Have you?
Over the past few months, a few reality TV stuff. Why do you do it?
That's a really good point. That is so good, because we are gluttons for punishment.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. To be fair, it has been a while since I last did reality TV. I moved on from that when I was younger, went into aesthetics and back to the books.
How did you change your life? Because overnight, you sort of get recognised, don't you, more when you've been on these reality TV shows?
Absolutely. So I was a model first, and then I went into reality TV, and I remember landing into Vegas and opening up my phone, and it had just gone mental where the first season had started to air. And then, it was just, for me, it was okay. It wasn't too bad. I didn't struggle too much.
Any fan mail?
Weird ones, yeah, not going to lie. A couple of page 3 pictures being sent to me, like I didn't know what my own boobs looked like.
Okay, that's a bit random, isn't it? So, look, we see these young people in this day and age, and you're probably a bit of a role model as well, because you've done all this stuff, and they want to say...
Loosely,
yeah, well, maybe. Then say, oh, I like that Chloe, I want to be like her. You think there's a little bit of too much pressure these days put on, especially young girls, to look a certain way?
I think it's mostly Instagram. I don't think it's just reality TV. Yeah. I think it's mostly Instagram, and I'm saying this as an aesthetic practitioner, so my job is to basically enhance how people look and how they feel about themselves. So, but I definitely see a lot of the pressure coming from Instagram. Definitely.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Any advice to young girls that's trying to compete with their friends? And you see these pictures on like Instagram, I don't go on there, but I've seen other social media platforms where young girls put their pictures on, and it looks nothing like these young girls, does it, sometimes? All this stuff.
This is the scary bit, what the editing and things like that, Well, basically, with aesthetics and things like that, it's just literally there to enhance how you look. Yeah. And you don't want to be a different person, you just want to look like the best version of you that you can be. Okay. And I think people are missing that. It's becoming a bit blurred with the old editing app.
So you talk about aesthetics. You've already, before we got on here, says there's very little you can do with my face. I said, well, I know. I'm a big...
No, it's okay. I'll just send you the list of everything we can do.
But you're going to train to be a nurse, aren't you, as well?
Yeah, September I go into university. Okay. I want to go into A&E. And then go into the private sector. So there's a couple of surgeons that I'm friends with, and we're going to do a private day surgery.
How long is that training then?
Fair few years. I won't look like this basically by the time I finish.
So you leave your scrubs on and...
I live in my scrubs with bodily fluids.
Do you have to go to university and on the day training as well?
Yeah, so I'll be in placement, so you'll see me on the ward. Okay. Well, hopefully not, but...
Okay.
Yeah.
Are you getting married this year as well?
I am, June.
What's
lucky lad, Grant Hall.
He's a very lucky... Grant who?
Grant Hall.
Hall, he plays football?
Yes, he does.
He said he played for Rotherham.
Rotherham, yeah, he was captain for QPR and then went to Middlesbrough, so we're... ships passing in the night at this point in our careers.
Okay, that's great. So you're sort of taking a different career now. Started off as a model.
Yeah.
Now you're going to be working in hospitals and have your own practice and whatever.
Yeah, I'm excited.
And future hubby, he's a footballer.
Yeah.
So he needs a life after football, doesn't he?
Definitely, definitely. He's God knows what he'll do, but he's got a good few years in him left, so I'm sure he'll figure it out along the way. But
I'm literally just about to launch my very own podcast called The Body Bible.
And what's that about?
It's literally about what we just spoke about, giving young people advice on things that are going on in the aesthetics industry, because obviously people can get work done from 18.
Right.
So I think it's really important to make sure that they're aware and like knowledge is out there of bits and pieces.
You see these people going to Turkey.
Oh, don't.
They get on the plane, they've got no hair, no teeth, and they come back looking
like this.
completely different. Are these turkey teeth?
They are.
Oh, the turkey teeth.
They are. But the teeth, I went to, funnily enough, I don't know if she'll like me saying this, but I had the same dentist as Amanda Holden.
Yeah.
But I did my research. I didn't just go to any random. It was that particular dentist that I wanted.
Some horror stories, don't you? You come by and they got these teeth in 3 days.
Teeth left.
Yeah, 3 teeth left. They look like Gabby Hayes. You don't remember
Yeah,
Gabby
no,
Hayes,
that's
do you?
just not the look.
So what sort of, you've got to give some sort of warning, public health warning out there.
100%.
People thinking about going.
There is a lot of horror stories of people travelling abroad, getting cheap surgeries. I mean, there are so many amazing practices in the UK. We've got amazing surgeons, and also there are practices out there that are now doing like interest-free, pay it off monthly over 2 years. So basically, it's like having a car lease.
Something goes wrong.
What, when you're abroad?
Yeah. So
You're
you
not
come
sure,
back,
are you?
and then the NHS has to pick up the tab, don't they?
Well, yeah, unfortunately, if you're a citizen of this country, that is the case, because they're in emergency services, aren't they? So if you travel back on the plane and it all goes peak-tong...
I think that'd be interesting, actually, Chloe, on your podcast to do some, like, warnings, you know.
It'll be interesting to get the stats on it. I'm not sure if we are aware of the stats on it with the NHS at the moment.
We're going to pull some points now. We're here for a reason. We're going to get Natalie in. Natalie, come back in, darling. If you just step over here, Chloe.
Yeah.
Obviously, avid watchers, viewers of the show. I bet you plug in every.
Oh, no, yeah.
Loads.
All the time. In my scraps.
Always got GB News on. One pot each. It's a simple task. You've got to pull a point in 30 seconds, plonk it on the bar, and I'll score
30
which
seconds.
one. Yeah, which one's
And we've got to get it to the top because my glass is tall. I have
yeah, gotta go, yeah. It's almost the same amount. Size and everything.
It's okay. All right. You can say when.
3, 2, 1, go. Look at this. Very quick. Very quick on the pull.
I hope my flow is up there. To be fair, I think my flow is quite quick. It is quick. Bad head, but quick flow.
Bad head.
Hold on. Done.
No, it's not to the top. That's not to the top.
No, it's not. No, it's not. It's going down.
Calm down, Ed. Just calm down. I'm looking at. Tell you what, they're not bad points actually.
Would you have complaints with that?
Natalie, you were listening. Early on to what Chloe had to say. You're quite glamorous, aren't you?
Oh, thank you.
Would you consider going to Turkey for a new set of nagers?
Do you know the funny thing is?
You intend to go?
I'm just looking at it only because I need work done, and here the prices are ridiculous.
So here's your chance now, Alice.
And they offered me dentures on the NHS.
Dentures? Oh no, you're too young for that.
It's not happening. So it's kind of my only option.
So will you be tuning into this young lady's podcast when it comes on?
Yeah, it is about to launch. We've actually got. I went to a post-mortem the other week. Post-mortem.
Yeah, it's not grisly.
It was good though. It was. I think it's backed by Deborah Meadham from Dragon's Den, and so I think we're going to get the owner Sam to come on and speak on the podcast about everything.
Okay, you want to invite me on?
Do you want to come on?
Not really.
Oh, okay. Well, don't.
Well, we'll talk about potential treatment.
Okay.
Because I think I've aged about 30 years this week.
It's the week's bad, isn't it?
I've had a bad week, yeah. I've had a bad week. It's been tough. Look, ladies, I'm looking at your points. They're both very, very good. You've both done a cracking job there. Let's have a look.
Do you know what? They're probably on par. I think.
I want to give you a 10 out of 10 each. Absolutely
Thank
brilliant.
No, same.
So, Natalie, thank you, darling.
Lovely.
Look to me.
Yeah.
Zoe, great. Good luck with your career.
Thank you.
That's on the ball. Big, massive thanks to all my guests tonight. It's been an absolutely cracking show. And a massive thank you to the staff here at the Parsons Pig Pub in Essex for lovely food on, great drinks. But look, coming up next week, we've got another great show, GB News, 7 p.m. Friday. But next, do not go away, because we've got Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan and... what's that noise? I think they're coming for me.
One is taking you away, Lee Anderson. Great to see you back on the box after a tumultuous week. Well, listen, a very busy Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan. Finally, At last, in an emergency statement at Downing Street just a couple of hours ago, the Prime Minister finally calls out extremism. I'll get reaction from former Government Minister Edwina Currie and TV News legend Nicholas Owen. So much to discuss on that one. Plus, should Buckingham Palace come clean about the health of King Charles and Princess Catherine in order to stop rumours and speculation? Did King Charles open a can of worms when he was so honest about his own health issues with regards to the cancer and his prostate treatment? Of course, we wish the royals well, but have they been guilty of oversharing? And what has happened to Princess Catherine? Where is she, and why was William absent from that memorial service for King Constantine of Greece? Also, as Spice Girl Jerry Halliwell's husband finds himself in hot water over alleged messages to a female colleague, I'll be asking, is flirting at work a sackable offence? Luckily, I don't do that here at GB News, because there's no one worth flirting with. A really busy show. Don't go anywhere. See you in 2.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest GB News weather update with me, Annie, from the Met Office. There's further hail snow to come for northern areas throughout tonight and through Saturday, and it's going to be staying cold across the UK through the weekend. Low pressure's very much in charge. We've got some occluded fronts wrapped around that low pressure system, and that's where the focus for the heaviest rain will continue to be throughout tonight. So some persistent rain will turn to snow over parts of southern Scotland and then into northern areas of Scotland later on tonight. And then another batch of rain will push into southern areas of England, bringing a risk of some hill snow here. But anything that does start to accumulate should quickly melt as the temperatures rise after sunrise. But it will still be quite a cold start to the weekend wherever you are. Some quite persistent rain will continue across central and eastern areas of England and then to southern Scotland later on in the day. And we'll also see this rain turn to snow across the far north of Scotland, particularly over the Highlands through Saturday afternoon. There'll be quite a brisk northerly breeze across northwestern areas, bringing that chilly feel, and in fact it'll actually still feel fairly cold out there for many areas. Turn drier throughout Saturday night, so it should be a much drier day on Sunday. There'll still be some mist and fog around and a few showers across western coasts, but I think it will feel much more pleasant in the sunshine with lighter winds and a bit more in the way of sunny and dry weather. However, across the east coast there could be some rain moving in at times. It looks like it'll stay cold into the start of next week, but temperatures do start to rise from Tuesday onwards. Bye-bye.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
I appreciate the story isn't in today's papers, but it has been running all week, and it's this row over the use of nitrogen hypoxia to kill this man who was on death row in Alabama.
Yeah.
And it's been linked back to you, and I wanted to ask you about it because this is intriguing, because you did a television show back in 2015 where you, I believe, tested this method of execution. Just tell me briefly about it, Michael. What happened?
I didn't test this method of execution, and it was a bit longer ago than that. But what I did do was test hypoxia. So I tested various ways in which people are killed in the United States, and asked the question as to whether there was a more humane way of doing it. So I was put into hypoxic situations, for example, into a chamber run by the Netherlands Air Force, which simulated what happens if you're in an aircraft at 30,000 feet and suddenly the windows blow out. And what happened to me was that I was almost instantly rendered incapable. As an experiment, I was trying to play with children's toys, putting triangle shapes into triangle spaces, and I was quickly unable to do that. I was asked, what is 9 minus 5? And I said 5. And then the officer who was with me, the Air Force officer who was wearing an oxygen mask, said to me, Michael, put your mask on or you will die. And I was incapable of putting my own mask on. Now, this suggested that hypoxia was very fast acting.
Yeah.
And that you had, obviously I was in no pain or anything like that. I was just completely unaware. By the way, this is why if you're on an aircraft and it depressurizes, you must put your own mask on first. But of course, I can't